How are you?
I'm good. It's going. I'm just in Vegas right now. We've had a long weekend here, but I'm leaving to go back after this call.
Oh, oh my gosh. I told everybody listening a little bit about the background of Dirty John and the show, but I know you've told this story a million times, I'm sure. I would love for you to just tell people what happened from your perspective and how you kind of came to understand that you had PTSD from it.
Okay, so my mom married a psychopath. He ended up coming after me, and I defended myself in a knife attack. And so I after that, I'm in the hospital. I go to the hospital. He's goes to the hospital, and then in the end he is dead because he was on life support for a few days and had to have the plug pulled. Um, and I just was really struggling afterwards with everything. And I wanted everyone to think that I was totally fine because I just didn't want to put myself as a burden onto anyone else. So I just tried to be like, I'm okay, that happened, but I'm coping with it great. However, I was not. I was extremely triggered by certain things. At first, I was in shock, though, because I didn't know how to handle it. It's nothing like this has ever happened in my life. And I went to therapy. They all diagnosed me with PTSD, and then I had to cope and deal with it and figure out ways to heal and recover.
So last time I talked to you was pretty recently after Dirty John had been picked up by Bravo. And a lot of the interview that I did with you then was related to the show and what it's like, after your family's trauma is picked up by a big network. This interview, I just want to focus more on the work that you're doing now, helping others with PTSD and hosting your podcast and doing coaching and all of that great stuff. So you mentioned something just now about triggers, and that's kind of how you knew that something was wrong. But can you maybe say some of the most common symptoms of PTSD, and if you have any sort of starter tips on what a listener might do first if they think that this applies to them?
Having PTSD and going through a trauma, you have to go through basically the 5 steps of mourning, basically. You're in shock, then you have anger, then you have triggers, and then you are unable to really figure out how to deal with them. And then at that point it's when you need to get help and you need to recover from that. And in order to recover, you need to do the work. I think that it's really important to find a coach or to find a therapist that specializes in trauma-based therapy, because having someone that knows what to do with that is so important. But to work with trauma, you really need to do mind, body, and soul, because trauma lives in your body and it's stored in the body. When you get to the recovery phase and you get past that, then you're in your acceptance, but you know how to manage it. And then you go to the next step where you want to help others. And that's kind of the recovery process. Is first you're in shock, then you go to anger, then you go to looking for resources and wanting to get understanding and try to heal. And then you go to the acceptance of you are healed and you have done a lot of work. And then you go into the mode of wanting to help others or wanting to educate others and just on their trauma. I feel those are the 5 steps for trauma.
For somebody who has never attended therapy or who has never gone through something very traumatic, where do you recommend them looking for a specialized coach or therapist?
You could look for a therapist in your area. There's sites on my site, I have a therapist site where you could search for a therapist. Or honestly, Instagram, if you need a narcissist recovery, if you need a trauma coach, sometimes you could find people on there. And then you could also go to my page if you don't feel that I'm the right fit for you, I always have different people that I could offer, because I feel that it's extremely important to basically connect your therapist.
Right.
Where, I could trigger someone, a blonde girl could have made fun of someone else in high school. And so I may not be the best fit because I may be triggering to someone, and that's totally fine. You just have to find someone that fits good for you.
And I think that a lot of the coaching work that you're talking about is specific to working through very specific situations. I know you mentioned like a narcissist coach, and I think you're talking about that kind of because he was a narcissist and that might have been a very specific thing, right? About him
Well,
that stuck out.
yeah, well, he was a psychopath. He checked a certain amount of the psychopathy checklist.
Hmm.
Um, narcissist recovery is so interesting because these guys aren't a normal breakup. They just, their minds don't work that way. They have a little bit of a lack of empathy, and they take things for their own. And so when you're in a narcissist relationship, or anyone that was like a narcissist, psychopath, or sociopath, you really have to recover from that relationship, because the amount of emotional trauma that they have done to you or anyone else is extreme. And literally, I have women that I coach, and we have to tackle their imposter syndrome a lot of the
Hmm.
time, because these guys have told these girls they're not beautiful. They have conditioned them to feel love in certain ways. And so these girls, at the end of these relationships, a lot of the time they're so insecure, and we need to rebuild them, because they are beautiful and they are great. They just were with a narcissist, and we have to learn how to avoid that now.
We're talking about this idea of coaching. You know, you are now a coach, and you help others who are in toxic relationships kind of understand that they're in a toxic relationship. You also help those with PTSD. So I know you just mentioned things like telling your girlfriend or boyfriend that they're not beautiful or they're not worthy, but can you kind of break down some of the very common signs that you might be in a toxic relationship? And after you realize, okay, this is not the right relationship for me, how can a coach help you with your toxic relationship?
One of the things that you could look out for in a toxic relationship is how he makes you feel at the end of the day. Does he make you feel worthy? Does he make you feel whole? Do you need him in your life to feel whole?
Mm,
Uh, that's something, if you can't live without him, that's something that's really concerning. Like, yeah, you may have a husband and you love and adore him, but at the end of the day, you were a person before you met him. And if you are unable to detach from that codependency, then you may have an unhealthy relationship. It can go from everything from like realizing that your relationship's unhealthy to that you're actually being abused in the relationship. Some signs of like the mentally abusive relationships that you are with a narcissist is that you are gaslit. That sometimes if you ask them a question and you're asking them a question about something, but they're convincing you that that story is not the right story and that didn't happen, that's a huge sign. That's a huge red flag to look out for. Some other things is, I really think how they treat the waiter is a sign. And if they don't have that connection between they're human and they're doing their job compared to they are the help, you know what I mean? It's like they have a power trip. And then some other things to look out for would be just they have good relationships with their family and whatnot. And if you're kind of like their only one that they spend time with, also if they create rules for you, no one should ever create rules for you. That is something that is a huge red flag in my book. A coach can only help guide the person. The person has to be able to willing to leave that relationship and want to leave in order to recover, you really need to have that acceptance, and then you could get a coach to help guide you and give you the work to do. They're going to put you back in check, and they're going to be like, wait, no, let's write a list of like why he was bad, because he was bad and you got out of that for a reason. So it's just reminding these women that they are great no matter what he was diagnosed with or if he was not diagnosed with. It's just, if you're in a toxic relationship, you really need to get out and do the work, but only you can do the work.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of women who realize that they're in toxic relationships might use this like, I want to help him, he's a narcissist. I want to help him get out of that. And I think one thing that a coach would be great for is telling them it is not your job to help him, and you're only going to hurt yourself in the process. Would you say that that's a fair statement to say, like, some women really think that they might notice the thing is wrong, but then they want to help fix the problem instead of getting out of the situation?
It's extremely common because I think it was taught that women were the ones that, did the dishes, they took care of the children, and that's how it was very traditionally. And in a traditional sense, it has like these gender roles. We're now learning so much about mental health and how it affects us.
If you are somebody in an abusive relationship, emotionally or physically, and you are seeing a therapist or a coach talking about this and they're trying to help you through it, maybe reflecting and thinking, if I'm trying to save him, that is a form of codependency, which just proves even more that this is toxic for me and my well-being. Because a lot of people think it's selfish to abandon somebody when something is, quote, wrong with them, like they are a narcissist or they are a psychopath. They want to help them and be the one to fix that. But I think a lot more goes into it than that. And the average person can usually not cure a psychopath. So just the thought of, I'd rather stay and hurt myself to help them is, a form of codependency, right?
Yeah, well, and then I have a lot of women that come to me that they've been in relationships with someone that may be narcissist or may not. And it's not up to me to judge whether they are or not. But if that person is abusing you or not giving you that fulfilled need you need in a relationship, then there is definitely something that you need to look at, like that you need to do the work to get away from that and not to be fixing anyone else. Because there are people that have issues, but they may not be a narcissist. And so it's just really healthy to realize when a relationship is unhealthy.
Right. It doesn't need to be abusive to be unhealthy. You have a podcast as well called Time Out with Terra. So I'm just wondering, what's been your favorite episode of your podcast and why? Did you have a special guest, a special topic, or something that was really fun for you to talk about?
Well, I'm going to say my favorite episode, just like story-wise, was the Jason Waller and Ashley Waller one, just because I felt like it was so important to talk about the subject of substance abuse and also like being a codependent. And there was just so much that you could learn from that episode. And it worked out for her and her relationship, but it doesn't work out for so many people. And I've been with an addict myself in the past. So I felt that episode was extremely informative.
I remember they came on Good Morning La La Land when I worked on the show, and their story was so inspiring, talking about addiction. It's not something people really talk about that much, and it's something that a lot of people struggle with. So that's definitely a great episode to listen to. I'll actually link that in the show notes, that specific episode, if people want to listen to it, because it is informative and I think important, not only for somebody who's in a relationship with somebody who is an addict, but also somebody who's friends with somebody who's in a relationship with an addict, because that's a role that is hard to play as well, is the friend. And how do you support your friends, right? I like to end the show with like a cheers. So is there
Okay.
any good news going on in the world or good news going on in your life that we can cheers to?
Well, I just had a great weekend in Vegas with someone that I'm dating, and we will see where that goes. So,
Well, cheers to that. I hope that it
yeah.
goes well. Thanks so much for coming on the show and stay in touch. It was so good to talk to you.
Yeah, so good talking to you too.